Wake up! It's the Sleep Unplugged podcast, episode 197, Top 10 Sleep Threat Power Rankings, the challenges we're facing. Welcome, everyone, to the Sleep Unplugged podcast. My name is Chris Winter. I'm a neurologist, sleep specialist, and your host for this episode of the podcast. If you're new to the Sleep Unplugged podcast family, welcome. If you're a veteran to the podcast, welcome back. We're glad you're here. If you want to get in touch with the show, have some thoughts or concerns about this week's power rankings, you can get in touch with the show at any time. Dr. Chris Winter Instagram, Dr. Chris Winter Twitter, Bluesky, Threads. We have a dedicated web page for the podcast. It's sleepunplugged.com. We post all of our power ranking previous month's list on there so you can compare and contrast. I can tell you that with one exception, this week's list is entirely different this month's list is entirely different from last month's. Since we don't have a sponsor for this episode of the podcast, I'm going to feature a listener's comment. This comes from us, Olinkawa Dolinka. I'm assuming that's not her given name, but maybe it is. And she wrote, and this was referring back to a podcast we did years ago on narcolepsy, which is always exciting when I get a viewer comment or a listener comment. This came to us 3 days ago for a podcast episode that was 3 years ago. I just love the fact that our back catalog is being listened to. And Olinkawa Dolinka said, the moment you mentioned Mr. Bean, I was like, no. Rat Race, parentheses, the movie where Rowan Atkinson is supposed to suffer from narcolepsy, delayed my diagnosis for 20 plus years. You are not alone, Olinkawa. It is a common thing that people have a very cartoonish impression of what narcolepsy is. And we here on the podcast are trying to do lots of things. We're trying to get rid of daylight saving time in favor of permanent standard time. And we are always an advocate to the narcolepsy and hypersomnia community and really trying to push out their education about what narcolepsy is and isn't. And if you have narcolepsy or hypersomnia, there's some big news coming, I think, in terms of new medications that we are certainly keeping track of. Thank you so much, Olinkawa, for listening to the podcast and taking the time to write in. We appreciate each and every one of you guys. So, if you're a listener of the podcast, you know last week of every month, and I cannot believe we're already at the last week of March. Been a busy week. All of our spring training is taking shape. I just got back from New York and Nashville, where I got to see a lot of Gibson guitars. So I threw on my Gibson guitar t-shirt. Also got to see Steve Lukather, one of my favorite musicians who was in Toto. Got to see him in the Musicians Hall of Fame, which was really cool. Um, so we're back with a top 10 sleep threats list. And when I was in Nashville, I was thinking, oh my gosh, one of the biggest sleep experts in the world just happens to be here in Nashville. And her name is Beth Malow, and she's amazing. And I remember it's always fun as a sleep clinician to play 6 degrees of separation, whatever that, how many separation degrees can you trace yourself to, Kevin Bacon? How many degrees does it take for you to link yourself up to a sleep expert? And Beth is really one of the top. It's easy because she's really, really, really good buddies with my fellowship director, Brad Vaughn, down at Chapel Hill. I feel like every time we were talking about research or doing something, he would always bring up Beth because Beth was also a neurologist who had interest in epilepsy as well as sleep, as well as a lot of other things. So this month's top 10 list features the top 10 list of Beth, who was kind enough to take the time out to give us her list. She is a neurologist and professor and vice chair of neurology at Vanderbilt University. She has a very long illustrious career. It's getting rarer and rarer to find sleep people who've been in the field longer than I have, but Beth has. She's a graduate of Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. She did her neurology residency at Beth Israel Deaconess Harvard. Afterwards, she did an NIH fellowship and a master's degree at Michigan, where she stayed on, was a tenured associate professor of neurology. She actually was the director of their sleep medicine fellowship program. So she was directing the sleep medicine fellowship at uh, Michigan when Brad was the director, I believe, at Chapel Hill. And then in 2003, around the time I was getting ready to start doing my fellowship, she transitioned from Michigan to Vanderbilt, where she is right now. She is a neurology professor there. She is the vice chair of Department of Neurology. She is the chief of their sleep disorders division. She's also the Burry Endowed Chair in Cognitive Childhood Development and serves as the director of the Vanderbilt Kennedy Center Clinical Translational Core. Beth is amazing. There's so many names and titles she has. It makes me think about I, whenever I do academic lectures, because I have none of that, I always make them up. And I don't really say anything about it. I think the last one I did a grand rounds in uh, medical school at MUSC, Medical University of South Carolina. I just put on there, Chris Winter, the Harold Bornstein Endowed Chair of Neurology and Sleep Medicine. If you don't know who Harold Bornstein is, you can look him up. And nobody ever questions it. But I'm pretty sure, whereas mine are completely made up, Beth's are completely legitimate. I look at people like this and think, she's doing all this great stuff, and I do this podcast and grow peppers. So there's a big gap here. And so I'm very excited to have Beth on here. So as if that weren't enough, Beth is being, this leader in the sleep field and kind of like one of those Phyllis Z people. She's always speaking and doing keynotes at big things. She's really outdone herself, in my opinion. And the reason I wanted to focus on her this month is because she has a new book out. And you're thinking a book of neurology or a book of sleep pearls or sleep wisdom or something about autism. No, her book is called Beyond the Politics of Contempt, Practical Steps to Build Positive Relationships in Divided Times. This is a unique book. It's a collaboration that she wrote with two other authors, and it's really rooted in her work with a group that Maeve, uh, the producer of this show, works for, which really works to try to reduce division that we have uh, in our politics right now. And I think and the name of the group's Braver Angels. And Braver Angels is really a group that's trying to foster communication, understanding, and dialogue that allows us to sort of navigate the division and conflict that we feel in our time. When I first saw that she had written this, I was really surprised. Like, this is so interesting that a neurologist, sleep specialist is doing this, but I have to admit, recently, one of the things that's distressed me the most about the politics of our time is our lack of faith, belief, understanding of science and people who work in science. And I am just in awe of Beth's desire to try to confront this in a very rational and understanding way. Whereas I would use something like sarcasm or some sort of pithy comment, she's really working to bridge these divides in much more lasting, meaningful, and I don't know, sympathetic ways. So I think that her grace and intellect is really something that's quite admirable. So again, the name of her book, Beyond the Politics of Contempt: Practical Steps to Build Positive Relationships in Divided Times. She actually has there's a web page for it that you can get more information about, and I can pull that up in just a second. It is oh, she has a, yeah, it's beyond the politics of contempt.com. You can buy it online on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million. Have it is probably at your local bookstore. They can order it. They also have a free Substack newsletter called togethernow.substack.com. So just want to give a great shout out to Beth for taking the time in her busy schedule. Please support her book and the work she's doing. The Sleep Unplugged podcast works because people have a desire to learn about sleep in a way that's scientifically rigorous. But none of it works if we are so blinded by our political tribal nature that we can't get beyond it. So I think that what we're doing here at the podcast is relatively trivial. What Beth's doing is really important. So please support her, buy her book, read it. I'd be really interested to see what comments you all have about that. So let's get into the podcast. And once again, these are the 10 things that Beth thinks are the biggest threats to sleep. And so we will count them down going backwards from 10 to number one. So number 10, and I think it's really interesting when we think about her list. I always try to look at these and come up with some sort of theme. All these experts that we've polled have had completely different lists. And when I look at her list, it makes me think about people and emotions and sort of sleep as a shared ecosystem that we all feel. And that when we go to bed alone, we never go to bed alone. We go to bed with all kinds of concepts and people, theoretically or figuratively, of course, when we think about this. So I want you to, I want to frame her list in that way because I think it really ties very closely to what is probably is what she writes about in her book. Before we do that, the title, so every time I ask somebody to give me a top 10 list, it's a top 10 list, a little bit about yourself and what's going on. And then if you're stranded on a desert island, what music would you bring? And Beth said, I don't know, maybe something a little upbeat, like something from Hamilton. So the so I listened to Beth, but then I went against what Beth said because she said, I don't know, something upbeat maybe from Hamilton. So I did choose something from Hamilton. The line, the challenge we're facing is from the song It's Quiet Uptown towards the end of the play. It's musical. It's one of my favorite songs on the soundtrack. I apologize to you, Beth, because it's not the most upbeat song. I'm not an upbeat kind of music guy. I tend to gravitate towards the dark, and I think It's Quiet Uptown is just one of the most emotionally gutting songs I have ever listened to as a music lover, as a parent. It's just something else. So we'll put It's Quiet Uptown from the musical Hamilton on our Spotify music playlist, Volume 4. So let's get into the list. It's something deeper than biology. It's highlighting our relationships. It's highlighting responsibilities, the emotional tone of our world, bringing that all to bed. So we'll start off with number 10, your bed partner's worries. What a great thing. Like this idea that you can be feeling great, but if your bed partner is worried about something or they're not feeling well, it's going to make it very difficult for you to be settled and at peace. If the person right next to you is in turmoil, it might make sleep pretty tough. And one of the things we have to think about with rumination and worry and anxiety is that these are transmissible. They're like little viruses, right? I go to bed and all it takes is my wife to say something to me like, I'm a little bit worried about this thing. We got worries, big and small, but even like little things, like I'm a little bit worried about, if this thing doesn't happen, or what if your kid doesn't get a job, or whatever is going on. And that little comment right before you go to bed. But anyway, we'll deal with it later. Good night. well, maybe you can deal with it later, but maybe this has started my own sort of worry and rumination as well too. So we always think as clinicians, I might be treating an individual, but I'm probably treating more than one person. I'm treating a partner, I'm treating a child, I'm treating a parent, I'm treating other sort of significant people in that life. So I like the idea that other people's sleep problems can be your sleep problems as well too. Number nine, late night work emails. What can you say beyond the current, where we are in time is a time of significant boundary erosion. The number one reason I think doctors burn out is because of online portals and patients communicating with doctors after hours, which I am guilty of. Patients communicate with me all the time. My perception is I'm gonna have to deal with it at some point, might as well be now. And in fairness, my patients are really judicious about when they get in touch with me. So to me, the late night email is stuff that I'm usually it's sort of a second tier kind of thing, and I'm dealing with it, trying to get some emails kind of returned late at night. And I've talked a lot about emails on this show. My email is a list of to-dos where once I've dealt with that email, it gets filed away. So I'm often responding to emails quite late at night. I'll often get a reply back like, "Wow, I didn't expect to get an email back from you at this time of day." Yeah, guilty. So we have to be very careful about that. So that anticipatory stress of the next day, knowing I have 70 emails to deal with versus 25, makes a difference to me in terms of how I sleep. So it's a catch 22. If I go to bed with a bunch of emails on my email list, there's a bit of an anxiety there. If I stay up to do it, I'm sleep depriving myself, but maybe going to bed with less anxiety. So we won't even get into the light of the screen in front of your face, which would be another whammy with number nine. Number eight, worrying about parents and siblings. I think caregiver stress we have talked about before on the show is very big. Parents, all you do is worry, and you never really stop. It only ebbs and flows. And I think caregiver stress and caregiver support, I think Roxanne Pritchard was the one who was talking about that in her top 10 list, is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. People live longer, long-term care is expensive and definitely something to think about. And once again, we have that distributed vigilance. Your kids are struggling, your parents are struggling, your partner's struggling. That can really, really make a situation where you're struggling quite a bit as well, too. Um, Number seven. So number eight was worrying about parents and siblings. Number seven, worrying about your kids. I think we're sort of evolutionarily wired to do this kind of thing. It's nothing new. And I think that it's especially potent at night when we lose those sort of distractions. Put away the groceries, buy the groceries, make the food, clean up the food, pack the lunch, get ready for bed. And then when you finally go to bed, it becomes a very quiet time for reflection, which can be positive. I always try to couch it with my patients that I want you running towards the bed and the quiet, not running away from it. But for a lot of people, that's when the worry and stress comes. It tends to be a bit drowned out when individuals are busy during the day. It's the Hamilton song, right? It's quiet uptown. It's a very quiet song, and the whole song is sort of built around terrible things have happened in this man's life, and he just wants to get away to a place where it's very quiet. He walks a lot. People see him kind of walking around. They kind of leave him alone because they know in that quiet, his mind is just filled with a lot of angst about decisions and things that have gone poorly in his life. Number six, worrying about our country. Very germane given the book that Beth wrote. And I think at a micro and a macro level, we worry about these things. I've got a child who is relatively new in the Navy, a relatively new officer. He's an aviator in training. And if you're asking me, do I worry about that and worry about, of course I do. Who wouldn't? You're at once very proud and excited that that he and his classmates and people all over the world decide, this is something that I want to do. I believe in our country. I want to defend it. I want to protect it, and I have no problem being in that sort of service, but it doesn't stop people from worrying about it. So, conflict, economy, gas prices. Oh my gosh, I was just listening to a podcast in the New York Times and listening to people talk about, the amount of their gas going up by 40%. And this one guy was talking about, well, that just basically comes out of my food. I'm going to always pay for food for my kids, but I might skip a meal here or there to pay for a little bit of extra gas. I mean, just so much difficulty and hardship. It's hard to pay attention to these things and not be worried right now. And again, it all kind of ties back to political types of things. I'm not making a statement about gas prices. Gas prices are more now than they were 6 months ago. There may be very justifiable reasons for doing that. It's sometimes kind of hard to see these things, but I try to come out everything sort of objectively. So, but it doesn't, being objective and trying to be evidence-based does not take away worry. And I think there's a lot of worry about these types of things. And when we lack control or agency over our lives at a small level, it impacts our sleep. And you can imagine when big things are happening. Could we be entering into World War III? I don't know what the thing is above that. Besides some sort of global catastrophe, an asteroid is coming to like smash into the Earth, and like one out of every 1,000 of us get to go into an underground tunnel and see if we can survive it out. What's more worrisome than a global war? Um, and again, I'm not trying to be alarmist, but these things are coming out of people's mouths now, so it's hard not to think about that and worry and that impact our sleep. Children entering the bedroom in the bed. Well, when people worry and there's stress and anxiety, kids tend to leave their bedroom and come to parents' bedroom. I just spent the last several weeks with a lot of baseball players and spring training, and man, it's one of the best things as I get older and my kids get older is every year spring training, hanging out with players who are having their first kid. They're getting engaged, they're getting married, and they're having their first kids, and it's just intoxicating to be around as a guy whose youngest kid is about to graduate college. That excitement about children and starting families. But with that often comes, my kids get in bed with me. That was a big theme with a lot of the players I was talking to about. And that might be a choice that you want, but it might not be. And sometimes kids getting into the bedroom can really make it difficult for people to sleep. And there's enforcement loops, really reinforcement loops on both sides where the kids are, their behavior is getting reinforced because the parents are like, I gotta get some sleep. I don't have time to deal with this, and the parents' sleep is getting reinforced in a negative way by their kid being there. And again, if this is a choice that you've made that you want kids in your bedroom, so be it. But as I've said on many occasions, I have encountered a lot of parents and adults in my clinic stating that my kid is in bed with me. How do I get them out? I have never encountered one parent or adult who has said, hey, my kids are sleeping soundly in their own bedrooms. How can I get them to come into my bedroom and sleep with us? That never, ever happens. Number four, pets entering the bedroom. This is interesting. I think that pets can sleep with owners in a way that's very sleep promoting. I think there have been studies about that, particularly with dogs and women. I think that if the dog or the pet is waking you up early to go to the bathroom, is barking at every sound that happens outside, is big and taking up a lot of space on the bed, this is a real negative. We have two small mini golden doodles. One sleeps in a little bed at the foot of our bed. One sleeps actually on the bed, but at the very end, like kind of in between our feet. I don't even know he's there. I don't know the little girl is in her little bed. They will sleep much longer than we will generally. And it always makes me feel good that when I'm away, the dogs are in there because the little one would respond if somebody came around the house. The big one would just not. He doesn't really care. Number three, extreme heat, a classic physiological threat. This is really the only one on the list that seems like something kind of out of a textbook, that, heat or something you would see on a TikTok video. So I thought it was interesting you put it on there. Thermoregulation makes a big difference in terms of sleep, particularly as we start to move towards the hotter summer months and mercifully leave the winter. Heat can really be a real problem. And if energy prices are going up, our ability to pay to keep things cooler might be a problem. So we can kind of relate that back to Beth's book as well, too. Number two, a snoring bed partner. The uninvited third party in the two-party bed system would be the snoring. I think is a very common reason why people struggle with sleep. So not only is it the bed partner struggling with their own sleep, snoring is an infinite risk factor for a lot of sleep problems. It doesn't have to be sleep apnea, although a lot of times snoring relates to that. But we get into the OSA sort of ripple effect as well too. They're sleeping poorly, making you sleep poorly. Not only the sound, but also the stress of hearing your partner struggle, gurgle, gasp, can't breathe. It's not fun to hear somebody quietly suffocate as you're trying to get some sleep. And it's often undertreated because it's often normalized. We think of snoring as, it's no big deal, and it is a big deal. So finally, number one, which was number 10 last week, is doom scrolling. It's really the perfect storm. It's endless novelty, it's threat detection, it's what's wrong with this country, it's political divides, it's stress about everything that we've probably talked about. All of your bed partner's worries. Number 10, you can find doom scrolling. Late night emails, you're going back and forth from the doom scrolling to your email. You're worrying about kids and parents because everything on there is meant to sort of tap into that. Hey, are your kids practicing dangerous, inhalations of whipped cream canisters? Just, whatever. The number one cause of kids, is all there on the doom scrolling. And it's all algorithm driven. It's all designed to keep you awake. It is not there to put you to sleep. I have never been on a phone at some point of the night and the phone says, "Shouldn't you be sleeping? I'm going to shut off now." I mean, that would be a wonderful thing, but that's not at all what they're interested in. So this list is really less about sleep hygiene outside of the temperature, right? And more about emotional load management. And how do we manage emotional load? We do it through the thoughtfulness and support of others. And one thing that we've really lost, I think, since the time of COVID, we had this sort of COVID situation, massive political divide and upheaval, is that we've become much more bonding in our relationships with others, and we've lost our bridging connections, our connections with others who might have different perspectives, different backgrounds, different beliefs. And I really like the idea of Beth and her book talking about we need these connections to manage these loads because it's these loads that are really keeping us up at night. So Roxanne was really talking about the social and structural socioeconomic threats. Dr. Kosla went into the sort of behavioral medical blind spots. Margaret last month was really focused on our modern lifestyle and tech. And now we've got Beth and the sleep disruptions as relational and societal phenomenon. And I think that as much as we will not do a book club of Beth's book because it's really outside the scope of this podcast. But I'm not sure you could come up with a better sleep book in 2026 than a book that allows us to kind of reach out to people, form new connections, form new understandings, because I think of so much of what we're exposed to, particularly with technology and doom scrolling, is designed to keep us at odds with other people. And hopefully, Beth and the work of Braver Angels and other organizations like this are going to shatter that, make people understand this is all an illusion. We have much more in common than we have differences. And when we reach out and communicate meaningfully with other people, it not only nourishes our soul, but it helps our sleep. So thank you very much, Beth, for taking the time. Please buy her book. Beyond the Politics of Contempt, Practical Steps to Build Positive Relationships in Divided Times. Check out Braver Angels. And until next week, sleep well.